Using a pick tool, press down on the silver tab and pull the wire from the connector. Using a pick tool, press down on the silver tab and pull the wire from the connector. Using a pick tool, press down on the silver tab and pull the wire from the connector.
Using a pick tool, press down on the silver tab and pull the wire from the connector. That's pure bull. Let's talk about it after the bump.
Rob Mac.
As you saw in the video last week, I decided to upgrade the interior to the carbon fiber and Alcantara trim. I installed the complete kit, including the armrest and the shifter knobs, and also the BMW Race Display Wheel. The process to install the wheel has a lot of steps and is pretty elaborate. I would not recommend this to anybody who doesn't have experience doing DIYs. One of the easiest parts of the install was supposed to be removing 2 wires from a wiring harness. I ended up breaking one of the wires in the harness and could not complete the install. That's until I MacGyvered my way through it and got it done, and I'm going to show you guys how. This installation will take at least 2 hours and is recommended for experienced DIYers. It assumes that you're starting off with an M Sport steering wheel and upgrading to the Race Display Wheel. You may have some extra steps and additional parts if you're upgrading a different steering wheel. Removing your existing wheel. The first thing you want to do is disconnect your battery. It's a good idea to block your trunk latch so you don't accidentally lock yourself out of your trunk. The next thing you're going to do is remove your airbag. There are going to be 2 holes on either side of the steering wheel that you have to push in with a screwdriver to release the pins that are holding in the airbag. Do this for both sides. Once the airbag is removed, disconnect the 2 wiring connections. Next, using a long handle socket wrench, you're going to break loose the 16mm bolt holding the steering wheel to the steering column. Once the bolt is removed, there'll be 2 additional connections that need to be released before you can remove the steering wheel from the steering column. Next, using a trim tool, pry apart the 2 halves of the steering column cover. Once the cover is removed, there'll be 4 7mm bolts that you need to take off before you can remove the remaining steering column controls. Next, you'll need to remove the 3 connectors, and then this step is complete. This kit comes with a wiring harness that you'll need to use in order to connect the steering wheel to the front electronics module. Familiarize yourself with this wiring diagram, but I'll show you each section as we move forward. First, you'll need to remove the dashboard trim with your hands and then release the 2 connections behind it. Remove the panel below the glove box that's held in by 10mm nuts. Release the 2 connections behind this panel and move it to the side. There's a small piece of trim in the door frame that you need to lift away that's held in by several clips. The clips that are holding this piece of trim to the door frame will likely get stuck in the door frame. You'll need to remove them with a trim tool and then slide them back into the trim. The front electronics module is behind the panel on the passenger side footwell held in by 3 clips. You can remove this piece by gently pulling it away from the interior. The first step is to take the long blue and white wire and run it from the footwell up through the dashboard and over to the steering wheel. Looking through the hole in the dashboard, you should be able to see right down into the passenger side footwell. You can use an old coat hanger and guide it directly through this opening. Next, you want to tape the wire destined for your steering wheel to the end of the coat hanger and then gently pull it back through the dashboard. Now you should be able to pass the wire to yourself behind the exposed steering column. Once you've pulled the wire through, you'll need to remove the wiring harness from the carrier in order to insert the blue and white wire into pin number 4. Once you've secured this connection, reinsert the wiring harness into the carrier in reverse. At this point, I taped up the connections with some fabric tape to make sure everything was secure. Reconnect all the connections back to the steering column combination switch. Reinstall the switch using the 7mm bolts and snap the 2 halves of the steering column cover back together. Finally, reinstall your dashboard trim panel. There's a module wrapped in really thick heat shrink that needs to be connected to the control unit on the wiring harness. In this step, we'll wire the FEM module CON 2 connections for pin 19 and 18. Start by removing the FEM module cover held in by a 10mm bolt. Then disconnect the CON 2 wiring harness. Remove the connector bank from the carrier using a pick tool. The gray bank is where you'll find pin 18 and pin 19, and you're going to be removing a red and blue wire. Normally, these should easily be removed by pressing in the silver tab with a pick tool and pulling the wires out the other side of the carrier bank. My installation did not go so smooth. As you can see in this picture, I could only remove the pins halfway from the connector. After working with the pins for almost an hour, eventually one of them broke. The next morning, I raided my wife's sewing kit, and using a variety of pins and needles, I was able to free the blue and red wires from the connector. From the wiring harness, replace the blue and red wire to pin 19. Do the same for the red wire, but to pin 18. The factory wires connect to the new connector in the wiring harness. Before I could do this step, I needed to replace the broken MQS connector on the red wire. Luckily, I had a BMW socket repair kit that had some extra MQS connectors. I had to snap off one of the connectors from the sheet. Then I had to strip a section of the broken wire. Next, I added the new connector. These connectors require a special crimping tool which I did not have access to, so I used a pair of pliers instead. Once I crimped the new connector as best I could, I thought it would be a great idea to burn myself with a soldering iron to make sure that the wire never wiggled loose. Now I can add the repaired connector to the new wiring harness location. Reinstall both wiring banks back into the carrier. In this next step, we need to tap a wire into pin 19 in Con bank 3, as well as install a ground wire into the footwell. The Con 3 harness is located directly to the left of the Con 2 harness and is removed exactly the same way. In this carrier, we need to remove the blue connector bank and locate pin 19. Once you've located the wire, use a pick tool to separate it a little from the bundle. Using the supplied wire tap, insert the wire from pin 19 in one side and the green wire from your wiring harness into the other. Using a pair of pliers, make sure you crush this wire tap well. Reinsert the blue bank back into the carrier. This next part was difficult to film, but in this picture you can see the ground wire connection banks. You should have an empty space on the one located in the center of the screen. Remove the nut from the ground connector and slide off the black cover. Locate an empty slot and then slide on your new ground wire. Reinstall the ground wire harness the same way you took it off. At this point, bundle up your excess wire length and tuck it behind the carpet. Reinstall the FEM module cover and the remaining trim in the opposite way that you took it off. Reinstall the glower glove box panel and connections. Now it's time to prep the new wheel. Remove the steering wheel front trim by removing the two T20 bolts on the front side of the wheel. Flip the wheel over and remove the remaining T20 screw. Now you should be able to remove the front steering wheel trim. Using a T20 again, remove the two bolts for the paddle shifters. Using a pick tool, free the various connectors and disconnect them. Using a T20 again, flip the wheel over and remove the two screws that are holding on the steering wheel back cover. If you have a heated wheel, disconnect this connection. The race display wheel does not support the heated steering wheel function. If your factory wheel came equipped with the lane departure motor, you'll need to remove the clip that's holding the motor in place with a pick tool. Disconnect any remaining connections and set the black module aside. You're now done with your old wheel. Add all of the parts on your new wheel in the reverse order from which you took them off the old wheel. I found that the easiest way to replace the clip holding the lane departure motor to the steering wheel was to use a pair of wide pliers. Replace the back cover, reinstall the steering wheel control buttons, Reinstall the paddle shifters from behind the wheel. Reconnect everything to the black control module. Then carefully tuck all of the connections and wires back in their original locations. Install your new steering wheel front cover. At this point, it's a good idea to check that the channel that you use to release your airbag is not blocked by any wires. This will ensure that you don't have any problems if you need to take your airbag off in the future. The steering column has a groove in it that ensures that you can only install the steering wheel one way. Tighten the 16mm bolt and torque it to 62 Newton meters or 46 foot-pounds. Reinstall all of your connections. Reconnect the airbag. Align it to its new location and push firmly from the center until you hear it click into place. Reconnect your battery and then confirm that everything is working. Congratulations, your new BMW Race Display Wheel is installed. The results speak for themselves. All in all, the wheel is beautiful and the functionality is awesome. Watch for another video where I go over the BMW Race Display Wheel functions and show you how everything works. If you enjoyed the video, please consider hitting the like button, leaving a comment, and subscribing to my channel. And remember, you can always follow me at M3Beats on Instagram for my latest car photography and stories.
Rob Mac.
Now I gotta figure out how to keep this damn thing clean.